enhancing social media, website. I was able to work with her to get some of these different buys outside of print. But I'm a big advocate for print, so we're not giving up on print, but we're just looking to see how we can get these dollars funded. So again, so just a little small background of myself, but again, working as project manager on this project. We have a wonderful panel today. So again, the Stop the Hate, just as you see this banner here, California Black Media, we launched the Stop the Hate, Spread the Love campaign. This Stop the Hate is under an initiative, we call it the Stop the Hate Initiative, was administered through the California State Library, but the funding came through the California State, through the California State. So it was, just as Regina is a master at finding ways to, fund different newsrooms and projects, she brought me over with this because, Tanu, who's going to speak more about it, he's the managing editor with California Black Media. They're providing tons of story and content that I see the inland, a lot of our publishers here syndicating and publishing, so we work with you all throughout the year. So the Stop the Hate is an initiative that we're really focusing on that specific content, that specific subject. But it's a broad subject, a lot of layers to it, and as we're unmasking it and kind of digging into it, that's where we're looking to work with you all as collaborators, speak with your editors, your writers. As Gloria was speaking earlier, there's different events. We're actually putting on several pop-up events ourselves throughout the year, throughout California, so we'll be speaking with different persons and publishers if our event ends up being in your region. Hopefully we can partner with you all and figure out how to, make our event much better success locally in your regions. So before I go on anymore, I think it's important we introduce our panel here. So I'll have them introduce themselves. I think it's best. So we'll start here with Tanu, and then we'll go on down.
Tanu Henry, I'm the managing editor at California Black Media. I work with Brandon on this project on the editorial side. So I work with Regina, managing all the content that comes out of California Black Media, writing and producing all the content that we share within our network. I've got a long experience working in media, in newspapers, internet. It's been about 20 years now. I met Regina in college. We went to Wilberforce University in Ohio. Her mom came out to speak to us. I was doing a project on black newspapers, got drawn into the whole thing, Mrs. Brown, and my senior project was black newspapers, and we hit it off, started a friendship, and we've been friends forever. So when this opportunity came up, I been working with her on CBM, and it's just been like a great experience of working with all the different publishers and seeing everybody here in person. It's always great. So and also with the EMS, a lot of people, familiar faces and names I'm seeing. So it's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Annalie Moraz. I'm from Mexico. I have a background in sociology. I have a PhD in visual sociology and social movements, and I slowly transitioned into media and became a journalist and co-founded Peninsula 360 Press, a Spanish-speaking media with automated translation into English for the Silicon Valley area. We also work as a communications studio and a kind of an international agency with nonprofit organizations that have covered different conflicts or elections or different social issues in Latin America, like Honduras, Colombia, Brazil, and now recently Peru. And so we have those two areas, and with this project we've focused on, of course, the Latinx community, not just in San Mateo County where we're based, but we've also done some stories throughout California, which I'll speak about soon.
Francis?
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Francis Espiritu. I'm with Philippine News Today. 37 years ago, migrated here from the Philippines and been part of the publications since 1996. We'd like to empower also my community, their struggle since they arrived in the 1800s, and with the collaboration with Stop Asian Hate, now I see the importance of collaboration, not just our own community, but different ethnic community, because the only way I guess we can address this is if we know their struggle, you know my struggle, I know your culture. But at the end of the day, we are all similar. We take care of our families, our children, education, and to make sure that they have a better future ahead of them. So thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all our guests joining. Just a quick hand for our guests joining us today. So I think it's important before we get into some questions, and I want this to be an open dialogue. We're obviously going to be speaking with our panelists here, but definitely going to open up to questions and just kind of use this as an opportunity to collaborate. I think it's important that we define or clarify what a hate crime is defined as. Briefly, under California law, a hate crime is a criminal act committed in whole or in part because of a victim's actual or perceived disability, gender, nationality, race or ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or association with someone with one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics. Hate crimes are distinct from hate incidents, which are actions or behaviors motivated by hate that may be protected by the First Amendment right to freedom of expression. Examples of hate incidents include name-calling, insults, and disturbing hate material in public places. If a hate incident starts to threaten a person or property, it may become a hate crime. Historically, hate crime data has generally been underreported, and this is a big thing to bring up because we know with all the stats we have, if it's underreported, how much clarity can we really have? But we'll dig into that later. But it's been really underreported, and the California Department of Justice recognizes that the data presented in its reports may not adequately reflect the actual number of the hate crime events that have occurred in the state. So just a quick sidebar, I've had a couple of meetings offline with the Civil Rights Department of California, speaking with a woman by the name of Becky Monroe. I believe she's her title may be Deputy Directors, but she's even aware of the vast, unfortunately, the underreporting. And this is something that as we're digging into this work, even working with law enforcement in different counties across the state, is trying to figure out how we can combat that. So I'd even urge you all to think about ideas or suggestions locally, legislative, that we can present during this project to ultimately combat this. Because I even put myself in that shoe that, God forbid, if something happened to me, I even know as a citizen, I would probably be so traumatized, maybe it would take a few days before I recognize that it was a hate crime, that the person that knocked me on my head, God forbid, or something of that magnitude, they said a racial slur. So we have to figure out how to protect our citizens and community members, that they have a safe space, either before or after, to report. And that's where our newsrooms really come in handy, because many times we know as local press, community members come to us before they go to law enforcement. Many times they want to speak to reporters anonymously. So the trust that we all develop within our newsrooms and local community is priceless. So I think that's where the state knows and we know we're pivotal, we're very important in this work. So just a quick side. But nevertheless, it is important to note that the total number of hate crime events reported in 2021 is the 6th highest ever recorded, and the highest since hate crime events skyrocketed in 2001 in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks of September 2011. Just a few more stats to just kind of set the stage. Data of hate crimes and incident. Attorney General Bonta and the DOJ released data in July of 2022. Sidebar as well, California Black Media, we're working on a data and mapping tool that we will release in the next, I'd say 30 to 60 days, that ethnic media and journalists will have access to, that will help you with your current reporting with Stop the Hate and moving forward. But as we're digging into the data and mapping, that's where we uncovered this data is just not up to par, for lack of better words. But we're still pulling it together and trying to make it accessible enough that you guys can navigate and just have these stats at your fingertip, rather than like me kind of looking for all this in paper. But overall, reported hate crime events increased 32.6% from about 1,300 in 2020 to about 1,700 in 2021. Anti-Black bias events were the most prevalent, increasing 12.5% from 456 in 2020 to 513 in 2021. Hate crime events motivated by sexual orientation bias increased just about 50%, it's 47.8, from 205 in 2020 to 303 in 2021. Anti-Asian bias events increased 177% from 89 in 2020 to 247 in 2021. Anti-Hispanic or Latino bias increased 29% from 152 in 2020 to 197 in 2021. Among hate crime events involving religious bias, anti-Jewish bias events were the most prevalent and increased 32% from 115 to 152. And last, from 2020 to 2021, the number of cases filed for prosecution by district attorneys and elected city attorneys involved in hate crime charges increased by 30%. So it's clear to see there's an uptick, there's a trend. And what's alarming is to know it's underreported. This is what we're really dealing with, the scope. And we, unfortunately, we know how polarizing America has become in the last few years. So we're here to have this discussion. So I just wanted to set the stage. We have the statistics, we have the minds, but we want to really dig into this because as journalists and editors, it's our responsibility to be conscious, to be sensitive. And I think ethnic media has done that charge better than anyone. That's really why we're needed. We say mainstream media, but without ethnic media, persons of color, we can't. Yes, sir.
These are state data?
Yes, this is Department of Justice released this data in 2022.
State meaning California State?
Yes, California State Department. And we'll make sure that we release this and we can share this with you after the fact. So I think let's go ahead and open it up to some initial questions. And I think maybe we'll start with Anna. How do you feel media bias shows up? And it's kind of a general question, but how do you feel it may or may not show up at times within your newsroom or outside?
Well, I was actually going to speak about what you were referring to.
Yes, please.
When you defined what a hate crime is, because what we found relatively quickly was that, and we had to put it out there, is the first impression people have when you talk about hate, and you ask them, have they ever encountered or have they been a victim of a hate crime? The first reaction is a no of a victim. And so I think one of the first things ethnic media is putting out there is exactly that, putting out there the definition, and so people can associate what they've lived through, or even what you even said, it takes you a few days to realize what you lived through, to understand what it is. And the reason why I'm saying this is we actually have a focus group in a community center in a really Hispanic neighbor, a high intensity demographic, high Latinx community, which is actually not. It's called the unincorporated area, and we have a focus group there, and we've talked to a lot of youth about hate, and the first thing that came up was they didn't quite. The first reaction was no, I've never lived through this, and then once the focus group started warming up, we did a portrait. We made them do a self-portrait of themselves, and then talk about their portrait, and they didn't really talk about, they didn't really show their faces in the portrait. And and when they were in front of the camera and we asked them questions, that's when it came. Oh, I was bullied at school for not speaking English. I was bullied at school for, my physical appearance, whatever it may be, and so forth. And I think that's where we come in, because I as we all know, the mass media will not go deep into society to cover these kinds of issues.
Well, if I could ask you, for instance, how do you feel? I mean, obviously, this Stop the Hate initiative has, kind of given us some, maybe the word incentive to focus in on this. But prior to this and kind of within this project, how are you approaching this content, this subject matter?
Well, in our department, especially, you know, in our editorial team, I mean, we've been reporting if there's like an incident. But after realizing it all, like if there's being committed or hate crime, don't jump to it right away or identify the culprit.
Okay.
Because some of this, okay, it's like throwing gas to a fire, you know, that later down the road, you know, it might not be even a hate crime, you know, it might be like,
So the journalist story could be adding fuel to
Yes.
misinformation.
yes, or to a certain group like the Hispanic, whites, the African American. So what we've decided is to not identify. I mean, we can report, we can provide resources,
Okay.
you know, that they can, you know, avail. Because how many articles or how many stories we publish, it's not really hate, but there's like a mental issue, drug dependency, or homelessness. So those are the things. So I guess as a publisher, I think we have great responsibility not to contribute to add fire or add more, fuel to the fire or make it divisive to the community.
Tanu, you might want to expound on this?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about biases and hate, I think there are two ways of looking at it historically. You can look at it historically. There's a well-documented history of mainstream newspaper, the LA Times, major newspaper in the country that has apologized for anti-black coverage over the years. So, I mean, that it's well-documented history, New York Times, Washington Post, just the way African Americans have been covered over centuries in this country. There's a well-documented history. I'm not making it up. Part of the reason the black press exists is to present a counterpoint to that narrative. And so that's the challenge we have in our newsroom when we talk about these things. We always try to elevate. How do we present another narrative, another story of black life that's not seen through that lens? But as we do this project, one of the things we've decided to do is also to educate black Californians about our neighbors.
Yes.
So looking at it like the only way, this is a bit of a recurring theme all day today about learning about each other and talking to each other and learning about Asian Americans and Native Americans and Latino Americans, Jewish Americans. So part of the coverage, the way we've taken it is to we looked at a calendar and we've been covering these stories from different, we've been covering like holidays, Hanukkah, we did something on Black Jews, we did something on Latinos, Native American history, Asian American, Title IX, the Asian American, Japanese American woman who was responsible for Title IX.
Yeah,
So
Patsy
we,
Mink, I think, correct?
Huh?
Patsy Mink?
Yeah, Patsy Mink. So we've gone through, it's been broad, but we go to these meetings and we brainstorm and we're like, how can we educate our audiences about their neighbors? That, because I love to use Regina's guiding quote from Ida B. Wells about that nobody can educate us better than the press. So that's kind of where we start. That's our guiding principle. There's no educator like the press. So we feel that starting to really just uncover these stories, they're simple stories about each other, but that way we can learn about each other and hopefully decrease some of the
I was gonna open it up to some questions. Did any of you have any more statements on that? I want to open it up. Go ahead.
We have
And introduce yourself. Just again.
Wallace Allen, West Side Story Newspaper, Empire Talks Back Radio. Stop the hate as a theme. Stop the hate from the perspective of media and its presentation, and using media to encourage our readers to stop the hate. So we're stuck with either describing the hate or solving the hate. And I think you made a point there about wanting to be sure we don't contribute to the hate. If hate is the focus word, that's what we're going to constantly do. I know stop the hate is but does that mean start the love? Does stop the hate mean start the
Well,
love? Does that mean-
I'd like to speak on that brief. I think our goal with this, you could call it the campaign name, because obviously with this grant in California Black Media, we were trying to find unique ways to kind of tackle this topic. And we were just kind of tossed the word hate as well. Everyone's just kind of, hey, you know, what can you come up with? But we realized that if we're gonna combat this issue, and to be honest, it was my idea that they kind of liked that. I came up with it in a meeting, but I'm like, spread love. What's the opposite of hate? Love. So as we're sitting back and we're all as a community wondering, what do we do? Back to the new, let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to know each other. Education. Sometimes the article, you may not combat it specifically with information equips people with clarity on who someone is. Because I think to Tanu's point, there was, you know, just using some polarizing names, but someone like Kanye West this year, let's not all get it, but he obviously highlighted a certain community and brought certain biases and discussions up. But it allowed us to say, let's take a step back and let's talk about the Jewish community, talk about the Holocaust, talk about Black Jewish, and just have that discussion. Talk about Lunar New Year, just came about. People call it a Chinese, but we've understood whole Asian culture celebrates it in various ways, so we want to learn about that and be sensitive to that. So these are what we're finding out, is that through this Stop the Hate initiative, and we've coined it Stop Hate, Spread the Love, to kind of give it an action item, because we're also doing pop-up events. Just quick background, we did our first pop-up event at the Taste of Soul Family Festival in Los Angeles, California, which is a street festival that garners about over 350,000 people in one day. But what we did is we had to figure out, well, how do we interact with the public? How do we combat hate, or how do we even have this discussion? Well, we weren't necessarily equipped in October with all this information as we were still, so we reached out to the Civil Rights Department of California. They came out. We reached out to the California Department of Social Services. They came out. We reached out to the LA Civil Rights Human and Equity Department. I mean, they came out. But I'm just giving you a glimpse of, excuse me? Her representative, yes, her office, they were definitely there. So yes, Capri came out. So as she shared, Capri Maddox is the president. She's a Black woman over the LA Civil Rights Department in Los Angeles. But this department was started within the last year or two under Garcetti's regime to start having this discussion, understand that, you know, civil rights is important. The Civil Rights Department of California used to be the Fair Housing and Equity Department. They did a rebranding. I'm sorry, Regina. I think we have something.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Because we had Senator, right? Yeah. Julian, this is good because it's going to be taped and we're going to be able to edit.
It's
so
all
let's
right.
just we're going to go for the edit, but we do have a wonderful senator here, and I'm going to let Julian introduce her because she actually has to get to another event. So I wanted her to come and address, but it'll be perfect. So
No problem.
just have her come on up. And Julian, you go ahead and do the introduction. You guys don't leave. We'll finish the conversation, but we have to interject her for time's sake. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, it turned out to be quite an event with so many colleagues in the industries and gathering all in one place in Sacramento, which is very rare. And we're so honored to have a representative of the Asian caucus, the legislatures, Assembly Member Stephanie Nguyen, who represents Sacramento. And my understanding is that